My beloved child. Stop scrolling for just a moment. Do not rush past these words, because there is something your heart has been trying to understand for longer than you realize. Something has been moving quietly behind the scenes of your life, and tonight, in this fictional message from heaven, the veil begins to lift. What you are about to hear was meant to find you at the exact emotional moment when you were beginning to wonder whether love was ever going to make sense again. Pause here for a moment. Take a slow breath. Because the person your heart keeps returning to, the person whose name can still change the rhythm of your thoughts, is not standing at the same emotional place they once stood. Something has changed. And the strangest part is that they may not have told you. They may have hidden it behind silence. They may have disguised it as distance. They may have acted as though they were completely fine without you. But deep inside, according to this fictional spiritual story, a realization has been growing inside them with such force that they can no longer pretend they do not feel it. They want to stay. They want something lasting. They want a future that does not disappear the moment things become difficult. But there is one condition. And before you become afraid of what that condition might be, listen carefully. It is not about your appearance. It is not about money. It is not about becoming someone you are not. It is not about proving your worth. The condition is much deeper. It has to do with the version of you that learned how to survive without being fully loved. Yes, beloved child. That is where this story begins. There was a time when you became so accustomed to protecting your heart that you forgot what it felt like to leave the door open. You learned how to say, "I'm okay," when you were not. You learned how to disappear emotionally while remaining physically present. You learned how to expect disappointment before happiness had the opportunity to arrive. And somewhere along the way, you became extraordinarily good at walking away before someone else could walk away from you. Your soulmate noticed. Perhaps they never understood why you became quiet at certain moments. Perhaps they wondered why you sometimes pulled back after becoming close. Perhaps they interpreted your silence as a lack of interest. Perhaps they thought you did not care as deeply as they did. But they did not see the whole story. They saw the wall. They did not see the wound that built it. And now something has happened that has forced them to look again. They have started asking themselves questions they avoided before. What if I lose this person? What if I waited too long? What if the distance between us becomes permanent? What if they finally stop hoping for me? And that last question is the one that frightened them most. Because there is a difference between believing someone will always be there and realizing they might actually leave. For a long time, they may have assumed your heart would remain available. Even when you became distant. Even when you stopped reaching out. Even when you stopped explaining yourself. Even when you became tired. They may have believed there would always be another tomorrow. But something changed. You stopped chasing. And your silence became louder than all the words you had ever spoken. That silence reached them. Not as punishment. Not as revenge. But as truth. There comes a moment when a person can no longer hear your love because they are too busy listening to their own fear. And your soulmate has entered that moment. They are beginning to understand that love is not guaranteed simply because two souls feel something powerful. Love requires presence. Love requires courage. Love requires honesty. And most importantly, love requires two people willing to stop running from the very thing they secretly want. That is why the condition exists. Your soulmate wants to stay with you forever in this fictional spiritual message, but they cannot stay with the version of you that keeps preparing for abandonment. And you cannot stay with the version of them that keeps expecting forgiveness without transformation. Something has to change. Not your value. Not your identity. Your patterns. The patterns that kept love standing outside the door. You may have thought the biggest problem between you was timing. Maybe you blamed distance. Maybe you blamed circumstances. Maybe you blamed another person. Maybe you blamed yourself. But what if the real problem was neither of you? What if the real battle was between love and fear? Because fear has a strange way of making two people who deeply care about each other behave like strangers. Fear tells one person to speak less. Fear tells the other person to wait longer. Fear convinces one person that reaching out will make them look weak. Fear convinces the other that silence means rejection. And suddenly two hearts are standing only a few emotional steps apart, yet neither one moves. That is the tragedy. Not that love disappeared, but that both people were afraid of what would happen if they admitted how much it mattered. And your soulmate has reached the point where hiding no longer feels safer. They are remembering moments. Small moments. A conversation. A look. A message. A strange coincidence. A moment when your presence made them feel understood without you even trying. They are replaying things they once dismissed. And every time they replay them, one realization becomes harder to escape. You were different. Not perfect. Different. There was something about you they could not easily replace. Something about the way your energy changed a room. Something about the way you could make them feel seen. Something about the way your absence affected them more than they expected. They tried distracting themselves. They tried acting normal. They tried convincing themselves that time would erase everything. But time did something unexpected. It clarified. The feelings they thought would disappear became more defined. The questions became sharper. The memories became more vivid. And the possibility of losing you became more real. This is where the story becomes intense. Because your soulmate is not simply afraid of losing a relationship. They are afraid of losing the possibility of becoming the person they should have been with you. There is a version of themselves they only discovered because of you. A softer version. A more honest version. A version capable of admitting fear. A version capable of saying, "I need you." And they have spent a long time resisting that version. Perhaps because vulnerability frightened them. Perhaps because they were taught to survive by hiding emotion. Perhaps because previous relationships taught them that caring deeply gives someone the power to hurt you. So they protected themselves. And you protected yourself. Two wounded people. Two guarded hearts. Two people secretly hoping the other would make the first move. But heaven, in this fictional story, is not asking either of you to chase. The message is asking you to become honest. There is a difference. Chasing says, "Choose me because I am afraid of losing you." Honesty says, "I care about you, but I will not abandon myself to keep you." That distinction changes everything. Your soulmate does not need you to become smaller. They do not need you to beg. They do not need you to prove that you deserve love. They need to know that if they return, they are returning to someone who knows their worth. And you need to know that if they return, they cannot return with the same behavior that caused the distance. This is the condition. The door can open. But the old relationship cannot walk through it. Something new must enter. Something mature. Something honest. Something that does not disappear when emotions become uncomfortable. That is why you may have felt recently as though your heart was being pulled in two directions. One part of you says, "I still love them." Another part says, "I cannot go through that again." And both voices are telling the truth. You can love someone and still refuse to repeat the same pain. You can miss someone and still choose yourself. You can believe in a connection and still require actions instead of promises. You can hope for reconciliation without putting your entire life on pause. That is spiritual maturity. And your soulmate is being forced to learn the same lesson. They are discovering that wanting forever is easy to say. Building forever is different. Anyone can say, "I will never leave." But forever is built through thousands of ordinary choices. Through communication. Through patience. Through accountability. Through keeping promises when nobody is watching. Through staying when a conversation becomes difficult. Through choosing truth instead of pride. Through saying sorry without immediately defending yourself. Through listening without preparing a counterargument. Through allowing another person to be human. Your soulmate may be realizing this now. And that realization may have come after something unexpectedly small. Maybe they saw something that reminded them of you. Maybe they heard a song. Maybe someone mentioned your name. Maybe they came across an old conversation. Maybe they saw a place where you once stood together. Or maybe nothing external happened at all. Maybe they simply woke up one morning and realized that pretending not to care was exhausting. Sometimes the greatest revelation arrives quietly. No thunder. No dramatic sign. Just a thought that refuses to leave. What if this person was not meant to be temporary? And once that question enters the heart, it changes everything. Because temporary people can be missed. But permanent possibilities must be faced. And your soulmate is beginning to face it. They are beginning to ask what forever would actually require. And that is where your story becomes more complicated. Because forever with you would require them to surrender something too. Their pride. Their need to always appear in control. Their habit of disappearing when emotions become intense, their belief that vulnerability is weakness. Their tendency to assume you will understand without them explaining. They cannot carry those habits into a future with you. And neither can you carry yours. You must surrender the habit of reading silence as rejection. You must surrender the habit of assuming the worst. You must surrender the urge to test someone instead of telling them what you need. You must surrender the belief that being emotionally independent means never needing anyone. This does not mean becoming dependent. It means becoming available to genuine connection. There is a difference. And perhaps that is why this message found you now. Not because heaven is promising a specific human being will magically appear at your door. Not because destiny eliminates free will. But because the fictional story is asking you to look at love differently. You have spent enough time wondering whether they will choose you. Now ask yourself something deeper. If they choose me, are we both ready to build something healthy? That question may be uncomfortable. But it is powerful. Because you are not asking for someone to stay merely because they fear losing you. You are asking for someone to stay because they have consciously chosen the life that love requires. And your soulmate, in this story, is approaching that realization. But there is still something they have not told you. Something they are afraid to admit. And this is where the hidden part begins. They are not only afraid that you will leave. They are afraid that if they finally come toward you, you may no longer want them. Think about that. The person you assumed was confident may secretly be terrified of rejection. The person you thought was indifferent may be wondering whether you have emotionally moved on. The person who seemed distant may be rehearsing conversations in their head. What would they say? How would you respond? Would you forgive them? Would you trust them? Would you believe them? Would you still recognize the person standing in front of you? And perhaps the most frightening question of all. Have I already lost my chance? That question has been haunting them. Because they know something you may not realize. You are changing. The old version of you who waited endlessly is disappearing. The old version who accepted uncertainty as proof of love is disappearing. The old version who thought suffering made a connection more meaningful is disappearing. And they can feel it. Even from a distance. They can sense that your energy is different. You are not as available to confusion. You are not as impressed by words. You are beginning to value peace. And that changes the equation. Because someone who wants access to your heart must now bring something more valuable than temporary intensity. They must bring consistency. And your soulmate knows it. They may not have the vocabulary for it. They may not even consciously understand why they feel unsettled. But something inside them is saying, if you go back, you cannot go back the same. And that is the condition. Not a punishment. A transformation. Not, become perfect. Become honest. Not, never make mistakes. Learn how to repair them. Not, never fight. Learn how to fight without destroying each other. Not, never feel afraid. Learn how to speak while you are afraid. That is what forever actually means. Forever is not the absence of difficult days. Forever is the decision to keep choosing each other through them. But before that can happen, something must be revealed. And your soulmate has been carrying this revelation alone. There is a sentence they have wanted to say. They may have almost said it. They may have typed it. They may have deleted it. They may have stared at your name and wondered whether to press send. Perhaps the message was short. Perhaps it was only a few words. But behind those words was an entire emotional history. Because sometimes the hardest message to send is not, I love you. It is, I know I hurt you. That sentence requires accountability. And accountability is where real love becomes different from fantasy. Your soulmate is being asked to confront the moments when they made you feel unwanted. The moments they disappeared. The moments they were inconsistent. The moments they expected you to understand what they refused to explain. The moments they allowed pride to speak louder than love. They may remember those moments differently than you do. But the emotional consequence remains. You felt something. And now they are beginning to understand it. This does not mean every past mistake was intentional. It does not mean they are secretly perfect. It means they are finally looking at their own behavior without immediately finding someone else to blame. That is growth. And growth is rarely comfortable. It can feel like grief. Because when someone realizes they hurt a person they genuinely loved, they must mourn the version of themselves who did not know better. Your soulmate may be in that process. And perhaps that is why their emotions have been unpredictable. One day they feel brave. The next day they retreat. One moment they want to reach out. The next they convince themselves it is too late. That internal battle is not proof of destiny. It is proof of humanity. And in this fictional spiritual message, heaven is not forcing their hand. Heaven is illuminating their choice. They must choose courage. You must choose self-respect. And if those two choices meet in the middle, something extraordinary becomes possible. But there is another layer. You have been asking for a sign. Maybe not out loud. Maybe quietly. Maybe you have said, if this person is really meant for me, give me something. And perhaps every coincidence has made you wonder. A number. A dream. A song. A name. A memory. A sudden feeling. But beloved child, do not build your future on signs alone. Signs can inspire reflection. They cannot replace communication. A healthy future requires evidence in behavior. That is the spiritual lesson hidden inside this story. If they want forever, let them demonstrate what forever looks like. If they say they have changed, let time reveal it. If they say they are ready, let consistency confirm it. If they say they love you, let their actions make the words believable. And if they cannot do that, you are not required to sacrifice your peace to keep the possibility alive. This is not about closing your heart. It is about putting a door on it. A door can open. A door can close. But a heart without boundaries becomes a place where everyone can enter and leave without responsibility. You were not created for that kind of love. In this fictional message, the archangel stands beside the unseen doorway of your future and whispers. Do not mistake longing for readiness. That sentence matters. Because your soulmate may long for you before they are ready for you. And you may long for them before you are ready for what being together would require. The longing is real. But the work is what determines the future. And something tells this story that the work has already begun. Not publicly. Not dramatically. Quietly. Your soulmate is beginning to change the way they think about you. They are no longer asking, "How do I get this person back?" They are beginning to ask, "How do I become someone they can safely trust again?" That is a completely different question. And it may be the most important question they have ever asked. Because getting someone back is about possession. Becoming worthy of their trust is about transformation. There is a huge difference. And while they are going through that internal shift, you are going through yours. You are learning that love does not have to feel like anxiety. You are learning that peace is not boredom. You are learning that stability does not mean the connection lacks passion. You are learning that someone can love you without keeping you guessing. And once you learn that, your standards will change. Not because you became cold. Because you became clear. You will no longer ask, "How much can I tolerate?" You will begin asking, "Does this relationship allow both of us to become better?" That is the question that separates fantasy from a future. And your soulmate may soon have to answer it too. But here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because there is something about your soulmate's past that connects directly to this condition. Something they experienced before you. Something that taught them to protect themselves. Something they never fully explained. And you may have mistaken the consequences of that wound for a lack of love. They did not pull away because you were unworthy. They pulled away because closeness activated a fear they did not know how to handle. And now, for the first time, they are beginning to recognize the pattern. They are seeing how their past has been controlling their present. They are realizing that every time something mattered deeply, they became afraid. Every time someone got close, they looked for a reason to create distance. Every time love became serious, they searched for an exit. Until you. Because something about you made running harder. You reached a place inside them that other people had never reached. And that frightened them. Not because you did something wrong. Because you mattered. Sometimes the person who affects us most is the person who exposes the places where we are least healed. And your soulmate saw their own reflection in your presence. They saw the person they could become. They also saw everything they were afraid of becoming. That is why this connection may have felt so intense. It was not simply attraction. It was confrontation. Two people encountering the parts of themselves they had spent years avoiding. And now, the condition stands between you. If they want forever, they must stop running when the connection becomes real. If you want forever, you must stop abandoning yourself when love becomes uncertain. Both of you have work to do. And neither person can do the other's work. That is the truth. You cannot heal them by loving them harder. They cannot heal you by promising forever. Healing is individual. Building a relationship is shared. That distinction will protect your heart. And now, beloved child, listen carefully because the next part of this story contains the revelation your soulmate has been afraid to face. They have been imagining a future with you. Not just a romantic moment. Not just a reunion. A life. Ordinary mornings. Shared decisions. Arguments that end in understanding instead of silence. A place that feels like home. Someone to call after a difficult day. Someone whose presence does not need to be earned. And strangely, what scares them most about this vision is not the responsibility. It is how peaceful it feels. Because they are used to confusing intensity with love. They are used to believing that if something does not hurt, it cannot be meaningful. But the future they imagine with you feels different. It feels quiet. Stable. Real. And that kind of love requires them to stop performing. No more pretending. No more games. No more disappearing to see whether you chase. No more withholding affection to feel powerful. No more pretending not to care. That is the forever they are beginning to understand. And there is one more thing. They know you deserve an answer. Not another mystery. Not another almost. Not another, maybe someday. An answer. But before they can give it, they must confront the fear that has kept them silent. And that fear has a name. It is the fear that you have finally learned how to live without them. They have noticed your strength. They have noticed your independence. They have noticed that you no longer seem desperate for their attention. And instead of making them feel relieved, it has made them realize something painful. You could actually walk away. You could actually choose peace. You could actually meet someone who gives you the consistency they once failed to provide. And for the first time, they are not assuming you will wait. That realization has changed them. Because when someone believes they have unlimited time, they postpone courage. When they realize time is limited, they finally become honest. Your soulmate is standing at that emotional crossroads. One road leads back into the familiar pattern. Silence. Pride. Fear. Distance. The other road requires something much harder. Truth. And they know that if they choose truth, they may have to hear things they do not want to hear. They may have to admit they were wrong. They may have to accept that your trust cannot be demanded. They may have to earn it. They may have to face the possibility that even if they love you, you might say no. That possibility is terrifying. But it is also what makes their choice meaningful. Because real love cannot be forced. You are not a prize waiting at the end of someone's emotional journey. You are a person. And you get to choose too. Remember that. You get to choose. Even if you love them. Even if you miss them. Even if your heart still reacts to their name. You still get to choose what kind of love enters your life. And that is why the condition is not simply theirs. It belongs to both of you. They must become honest enough to stay. You must become strong enough not to settle. And somewhere between those two transformations, the possibility of forever begins. But the story is not finished. Not even close. Because there is a conversation coming. A conversation your soulmate has imagined many times. A conversation that may begin with something ordinary. A simple greeting. A casual question. Something that appears harmless. But beneath those words will be an emotional confession they have been carrying for much longer than you know. They may try to sound calm. They may pretend they are only checking in. They may act as though nothing has changed. But you will notice something. Their words will feel different. Their pauses will feel different. Their energy will feel different. And eventually, they will reach the question they have been avoiding. The question that could change the entire direction of this story. But before that moment arrives, there is one final truth you must hear in part 1. Do not chase the door. Let the person on the other side decide whether they are brave enough to knock. You have already done enough emotional running. You have already spent enough nights wondering. You have already questioned your value because someone else could not communicate their feelings. That chapter is ending. If they want forever, they must walk toward you. Not because you are demanding perfection. Because you deserve participation. You deserve someone who does not merely feel something for you in private but is willing to build something with you in reality. And if they come, listen carefully. Do not listen only to what your heart wants to hear. Listen to what their behavior says. Listen for accountability. Listen for clarity. Listen for consistency. Listen for the willingness to create something healthier than what existed before. Because the condition is simple, even though it is difficult. If your soulmate wants to stay forever, they must meet the real you. Not the version who always forgives. Not the version who waits forever. Not the version who accepts uncertainty. The real you. The one with boundaries. The one with dreams. The one with fears. The one who can love deeply without losing themselves. And you must meet the real them too. Not the fantasy. Not the potential. Not the person you hope they become. The person they are willing to prove themselves to be. That is where the future becomes real. And just when you think you understand the condition, there is one more secret waiting underneath it. Because your soulmate has already made a decision. Not the decision you think. Not yet. They have made a decision about what they will no longer do. They have decided they cannot keep pretending. They cannot keep watching from a distance. They cannot keep telling themselves that time will solve what courage refused to confront. Something inside them has finally reached its limit. And the next move will force both of you to confront everything you have been avoiding. But there is a detail you do not know. A detail connected to the last time they almost reached out. They were closer than you think. They had the words. They had the intention. They had the moment. And then something happened. Something they saw, heard, remembered, or discovered made them stop. It changed the message they were about to send. It changed what they believed about you. And it created a question that they are still carrying today. A question so powerful that it may determine whether this love receives another chapter or finally becomes a memory. The question is not whether they love you. The question is not whether they miss you. The question is not even whether they want forever. The question is whether they believe you would still open the door if they finally told you the truth. And what they discovered about you may have convinced them that the answer is not as simple as they hoped. Because while they were trying to understand their feelings, you were becoming someone they could no longer take for granted. And that realization has set something in motion. Something you cannot see yet. Something they have not told anyone. Something that could change the meaning of every silence between you. So stay with this story. Because the next revelation is not about what your soulmate feels. It is about what they are preparing to do. And once you understand why they have been waiting, you may finally understand why the distance between you had to happen in the first place. The door is not closed. But it is no longer wide open. And somewhere on the other side of it, your soulmate is standing with a truth they have been afraid to speak. They want to stay. They want forever. But before they can ask you for another chance, they must finally tell you what happened the last time they almost came back. And that secret is where everything changes.